Welcome to Life Lesson 101. Trish, this is the first in the series.
Mm-hmm.
You are the first in the series. This little interview here is the first in the series looking at, and although you may not even like the idea of what I'm about to say, but of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. But I should also say, welcome to the purple chair.
Thank you. Feels very honoured place to sit.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I should tell you that Trish did point out before the interview started that this is a couch or a sofa, not a chair. But stuff it. Yeah. Yes, that's right. Boom, boom. I did it.
Yeah, so funny.
Oh, God, we're so comical.
I know.
Yeah, well done. And now the interview.
Yeah.
But yeah, so welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Sometimes you wonder if the studio will ever be quiet.
Unlikely.
There we go.
Boom.
Boom.
Yep.
So there's lots going on in this studio. Yes, never mind explaining, but there is. But you and I are the most important people here.
Apparently.
Apparently, we're going to try and be important. I please. Somebody take me seriously. So, Trish, what I wanted to do is just really have a look at what you do today. And on first hearing, one might assume that it isn't that extraordinary. But when we look back at where you were, I think people might see that this is something quite extraordinary. So why don't you tell us what you do now?
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell, yes.
In a nutshell.
Just a minute.
Okay.
59 seconds.
Okay. And counting. So there's a team of 5 of us. I have a small business and we run workshops helping people be more confident at the front of the room. So whether that is being a presenter or a facilitator or a trainer, we tend to work with and help people feel more confident doing that. We also work with managers to improve their communication skills, particularly with their teams. So that's it in a nutshell.
Wow. So you're helping people find a complete voice.
Yeah, I guess so. It is about helping people discover that they pretty much already know how to do what they want to do, and they usually do it pretty well. They often haven't had any feedback or any kind of guidance. So, and we also, it's about finding the authentic self. So people come into that space often thinking they have to become someone, becoming the manager or I'm the presenter or the facilitator. And actually what we talk about at the very beginning is that the idea is that you can actually just be yourself. You've already got everything that you need. And so there's a great sense of relief usually for people that they don't have to become someone that they're not. And we talk about why being authentic is really important. And I ask them. I don't tell them the answers, but inevitably most people know that the more authentic you are, the easier it is to make a genuine connection, and then it's easier to build trust. It's easier to actually find out what people really think, to really connect with people and to have people buy into, if you're wanting them to learn something or do something that you need them to do.
I wanted to pick up on that just on a moment, just from a singing teacher's point of view. And I just thought, sometimes when I'm teaching someone, they've tried to sing in the style of someone.
Right. Yep.
And, but what happens is that they're not actually singing the style of that someone. They're actually wanting to become that someone. They try.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But
mannerisms. I've seen people try and be Mariah Carey
and use that hand.
Yeah, do the hand thing. Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But here's the interesting thing about that is that when we try and become someone else, at least from a singer's point of view, we also pick up all of their faults.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So at least being ourselves, as best as we can, we only have to deal with us.
Yes.
And I have this little phrase that I use, is that I do me as well or as poorly as I do me, and no one else can do me quite as well as I do, or quite as poorly as I can. But I mean, so I'm very interested in that aspect of authenticity, and discovering what we're capable of within the confines of how we see ourselves. But let's have a look at you at the moment.
Put you under the microscope.
So, where were you born?
I was born here in Lower Hutt.
Lower Hutt.
I was. To English immigrant parents. They arrived in 1962 with my two older brothers, two siblings. And then I was born accidentally, unexpectedly, 2 years after that. And then my sister was 4 years after that. So my parents, in effect, had kind of two families.
Right. And, I mean, how did you... I mean, you obviously know that you were a bit of a surprise.
Yes. I was also a bit of a handful. I'd always that very strong-willed, knew her own mind kind of ballsy kid, really.
Were you left alone to be that?
I pretty much was. I don't think there was any choice in the matter. And I think my parents were a bit tired after already having raised what they thought were their children. So
that's quite...
I was...
What were their children? Were they ours?
I felt quite fortunate, though, and it suited me. And I never really betrayed that sort of confidence that I could look after myself, so I became very independent. But even before, I'm thinking teenage years, going out to parties and things, I was the age of 3 standing on a crepe paper box singing "Oh Christmas Tree" at the kindergarten concert, and it didn't occur to me that I shouldn't. Yeah. Right. 11, I was the star of the school show, having did my audition singing Fernando in the corridor to the principal. I was the person who would do the notices. So this is in the old days, right? We had intercom, and it was, "Hello, this is Patricia Stonestreet, and these are the notices for today." And guess what the kids used to do? They used to go, "Hello, it's Patricia Stonestreet, and these are the notices." And about 11, you want to be cool and you want to be popular. So all of a sudden, I started getting this message, right, that I was not to be that person. I had to kind of be quiet. I wasn't pretty like Jane. So I developed a personality because that was my way of coping. Yeah.
But you didn't have a struggle being in the mix.
No, it was kind of my natural gift to be able to communicate and to be able to speak, and it just hadn't occurred to me that not everybody thought that was a good idea. So that sort of teasing at the age of 11 sowed, I think, this little seed that it wasn't okay to speak up and stand up. And so by the time I was sort of 14 probably, I was, under the radar with everything. I was even invited to study opera.
Right.
And I kind of made a joke that I didn't want to study opera because I wanted to be like Pat Benatar.
All right.
Of course, I discovered that Pat Benatar studied opera, so that was a lose-lose, but I didn't want to be seen as anything special. I didn't want to stand out. So I still had my kind of natural, this personality to cope with not being pretty, but my head had to be at a certain place. I was very cognizant of sort of not being too annoying.
So if you like, there was a bit of a paradox in existence.
Very, yeah.
You had this kind of explosive you who needed to be covered.
Yeah.
So you weren't, you could be as explosive if you like within the right company, I imagine. Yes. But I still, even now, 40 years later, still struggle with working out what that means and caring about that. And still there are some people, a few people that I feel safe being myself with, and so I do. And so I kind of keep my set quite limited. Right.
Yeah. And that that's just, I mean, I've always been sort of a best friend kind of person rather than 200 acquaintances. So that suits me as well. But, I loved being the centre of attention. At some point in my life, I lost the desire to do that because I didn't want to be laughed at. So there are consequences when that stuff happens, because it was sort of around that stage where I started having, I mean, I know them now as panic attacks, but I didn't give them a label. But there were times where, particularly at school, if I was in particular classes, I would just have to get out, that kind of stuff.
Can you describe what they felt like?
Not really, because they were a long time ago and they're different now. But it was just literally a need to escape. So I think
was it physiological as well as a mental thing?
Oh, it was very physiological.
Right.
Yeah, I had a very physiological responses. So and it was kind of like, it was almost like the thought.
Did you sweat?
Do we have to get into the details of that?
Well, I'm interested only on the basis that I don't
remember necessarily.
Yeah, I just know that people feel those very similar things when they're faced with, performing.
Yeah, I mean, they were the usual flight.
Flight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were the usual flight responses. We'll just leave them there. If that's all right.
Look, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, but it's the same stuff.
It's
the same stuff. And for me, it was the perception that I couldn't leave, so therefore I wanted to or had to. So there was some weird stuff going on.
Just to give you some just a little insight. I mean, when I'm on stage or have been on stage, people look at me as very confident, whatever. They don't realise that 15 minutes before on, I'm taking a shit. And literally. I mean, it's a very real thing, that anxiety, that feeling.
Yeah, and so I didn't even have that name for it in those days either.
Right.
I would just, not want to be in the room and have to leave.
Right.
So, I mean, and then timeline, I have no idea, but I certainly know that by the time I was working in my dream job in an advertising agency at the age of 21, I would get very nervous whenever I had to go into a meeting, because again, closed room, and then there'd be some expectation of behaviour, and normally I'd have to present even if it was just sitting down. So, it was one of those things that was kind of there, but it wasn't all encompassing. It wasn't until, so at the age of 21, I then left that dream job and went to England. My first overseas trip, I got on a plane and went straight to England. Hadn't even been to Australia. And having a British passport, I got to live there for 4 years. And at that, some time in there, I met an Englishman who I lived with, and I think I got engaged too. I'm pretty sure.
He was a forgettable guy.
He wasn't.
I mean, really?
No, he wasn't, but that bit was forgettable. But what I do know is I was in a relationship and I didn't want to be in.
Right.
And I was trying to work out how to get out of it. And so I announced I was going home to New Zealand, and he announced he was coming with me. So I remember having my very next panic attack, one of many years, on the train going to the interview with his firm that were going to send him to New Zealand, and then another one in the meeting, and then another one on the plane coming home with him beside me, and then all-encompassing, it felt a bit like that, all-encompassing panic attack. So in fact, before we left, this is when my agoraphobia got really full blown, and I guess that's when I first got a name for it, because that feeling that I'd had sort of at school, having to get out, was constant. But then it also, I couldn't leave. There was a point where I couldn't leave our apartment, or and I'd get to a point where I would leave, and then I'd be in the supermarket, and then I'd completely freak out, and then I'd have to come back. I had a job, but it involved getting in a minivan and driving 20 minutes, and it was lucky if I got in there, and sometimes I had to get back out again, and so it was just, that's when it was full blown.
So when you say full blown, was there ever a time I imagine there would have been, but when even that first step, approaching the door to get out of the house, was just actually that I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of days I couldn't. Yeah, I could not leave. I was in that, which is weird, you know, because that feeling of having to get out, and yet here I was in this confined place that I couldn't get out of. It was more paradoxes and strange. And so, you know, years later, I've worked out that was really about not speaking my truth. That was about being in a relationship I didn't want to be in, and again, another paradox of a very outspoken person not being able to actually speak that truth. So, yeah.
In all of this, I mean, how did you then, what was that point when you, was it a continual thing where you said, oh, I have to do something about this? Or even doing something about it would mean having to move, having to face something, and therefore you were constantly blocking the progress of overcoming it. How did you get to that point where you said to yourself, okay, look, I've got this damn thing. I actually know what it is. I know it's a tangible thing, and I know that my life is going to be hell if I'm not facing it. So, of course, it was something you were facing anyway. How did you come to the point where you said, no, I've got to do something? Knowing full well that doing something meant actually having to face moving, so to speak.
I think there are a number of stages, some forward, some back. I remember because I was just in this world, this complete all-encompassing world, I had no idea what was going on. And one of the friends of this guy I was living with said, they sound like panic attacks to me. You should go and see a doctor. So I went and saw a doctor, and they pretty much confirmed that, and they sent me to somebody, I'm guessing a psychologist, can't remember what their qualifications were now, and they taught me relaxation, breathing exercises, and gave me Valium, which did my head in. I couldn't cope with that. I remember feeling some relief from that, but really I was full blown into it. It wasn't until I got back to New Zealand and trying to leave the house again, because I was still in full blown. Through all these things, I still have managed to go out and get a job, and so I was back in the world of advertising, you know, a big grown up job, and I was, you know, and yet I was still struggling to leave every morning. And I was given a book called Self-Help with Your Nerves.
Right.
I know.
Who that was by? You don't know.
No, but even that, it felt like, the way I think of it now, is some old granny type person who, you know, because even self-help with your nerves, I don't know, right. It just sounds really...
too self-helpy.
Yeah, very self-helpy. And I remember reading something in there about the fear breeds fear cycle. And getting to, and this sounds bizarre, but I was literally sitting on the toilet reading this book and going, and I just read a piece that said it was the fear breeds fear and how you break the cycle. And it was the first time that I had the thought that I needed to accept this, another paradox, in order for it to go away. Because I was getting so afraid that I was going to have panic attacks that I was just in this deep, deep spiral. And so I literally remember having that thought, and I hadn't actually remembered that in however many years. That's the first time I've remembered that in a long time. Yeah.
Well,
so there was that. That's why you're there. There was that point where I had that thought, and something happened. I could feel a shift. So I knew that I was onto something. Right. I didn't have all the answers at that point, but I knew I was onto something.
So this is quite incredible, isn't it? I mean, you speak about, this is the first time that you've, thought about
that specific thing.
Yeah. But there must have been, if you like, those things, those happenings in life again and again. I mean, you're sitting on Twitter, reading a book. You've also, I guess not being able to come out of a relationship like you wanted to, that in and of itself would have been a trigger towards doing something, right? Trying to handle, because you weren't just handling you were handling him and how he was around you with this.
Oh, yeah. He wasn't it wasn't his jam at all.
Right.
He didn't know what to do.
Right.
Yeah, he didn't know what to do.
No empathic nature. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't stand up. It might have hit
He's
him.
a lovely man.
Yeah.
He had a rebound marriage that failed, and then he finally did fall in love. So I'm very happy.
Well, wonderful.
Yeah, and when his parents came to New Zealand to go to his first wedding, they came to see me, which was lovely. I loved his parents. They were lovely. And he was a lovely guy. Just, I didn't love him.
Yeah, and there were things that you were dealing with, right?
Well, yeah. Yeah, and it was definitely dealing with that on my own, which is another one of my patterns.
Yeah. But I guess really, dealing with something on your own, you were bred as an independent child. And so, maybe this was, it had to be your strategy.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm assuming, therefore, thinking about what we said earlier on about authenticity, maybe that wasn't buying into it so much at the time. Maybe you weren't aware of your authenticity. But I imagine there was something in a script in you that was saying, I know how to handle this. I can do this.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It's just that's my MO. When the going gets tough, the walls come down.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know if that had any bearing on anything, but it was also the truth. The source was definitely me. Yeah, and I think that's true for those kinds of things. And I only like to speak for myself because I don't like to assume other people's processes or journeys or answers, but I know for me it was, I sought help. And
talk about that,
yeah.
the seeking of help, because we've got to the book.
I got to the book.
We got to the toilet.
Somewhere in there, yeah, thank you for that. Somewhere in there, I went to a psychologist. That was a very expensive exercise and largely useless. He was terrible. He finally decided at the end of, we had a certain number of meetings or sessions booked, and he decided in desperation in the last one that I'd had an incestuous relationship with my father, which was, I believe, untrue. Never say never, but pretty certain. Yeah, it was just kind of like, interestingly, he's a very successful psychologist now too, but hopefully he doesn't private practice, or maybe I was his first client, who knows. But there were lots of attempts to seek help, but nobody can fix it for you, regardless of what they think the cause is. That fundamentally, for me, most of the time, it was about managing it rather than curing it. Because I think as part of that acceptance, I'd accepted that it's going to happen. I think later years, I have gotten to the point where there are still parts of it around, but
Trish, just speak a little bit further into
yeah, there are still parts of it around, but I don't think that it certainly doesn't rule my life now, right. But it definitely influences still lots of things.
Right. This is obviously unrelated, but, an alcoholic isn't cured. An alcoholic manages. I
think when you have a sensitive system, so I think part of my nature, whilst it was that stroppy independence, there was also, and it depends what you believe, I think I believe this, that there's sort of a hereditary element to nervous systems, I guess. I know that my grandmother was caught in the Blitz in the East End and suffered, they called it shell shock in those days. I know my father in World War II also, I didn't really know my grandmother very well. I met her once, but I knew my father pretty well, and he was quite a, it's hard to find the words to describe him, but he was quite a stroppy man too, but without an intellect to back it up. So he was a very frustrated, angry, resentful kind of man. So there's that also the nurture pace of living in an environment where you're on tenterhooks the whole time. And so you'd come in the door and, you know, the decision, depending on the vibe of the house, do you go to the lounge or do you go straight to the bedroom kind of vibe? It's weird. It feels very uncomfortable still talking about him in this way. I feel disloyal, but it is the truth. And so what you ought to do is make a decision about how you responded to that. If you were me, you go head to head. If you hadn't gone that way, you'd go in there and it would be like that. And my 3 siblings pretty much went the other way. They were, you know, kind of keep everything under the radar. And I'd think it's pretty true that all 3 of them as well have had issues. So the nurture part was also a big part of it as well. I think that was a big part. Plus, if you add that other piece of the potentially genetic or ancestral DNA.
This is all very, very familiar to me.
Yeah.
Very, very familiar.
Yeah, it's a thing, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so. But I wanted to pick up on the language that you're using.
Yes, go on.
Because, you know, it isn't the language of blame. You're saying that, look, there are elements to my life, but independent you, from the early age you, is a responsible you. You sound like you're I'm not saying, hey, look, I'm responsible.
Yeah. No, I know. You're not saying, it's not spelled Fault.
You know,
yeah, I get it.
But, you know, you're taking on the responsibility of this agoraphobia, anxiety. You're seeking it. Now look, I'm interested. So, okay, I obviously know that you have new love in your life.
Do I?
Well, not new as in today, but you're definitely not with the guy that you were with originally.
This is true. Yes.
Did
is
that
true.
have any bearing on your overcoming?
The love? Yes.
Was it a catalyst?
But maybe no. Not in the way that you think. No.
I don't know what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So
well, that you know, I was loved enough finally, and so therefore I found I was okay.
No.
Was not what happened.
No. That's a bit too fairy tale.
Yeah.
I want the grit woman.
I like fairy tales, but still waiting.
Well, I like fairy tales.
No, he's definitely my Prince Charming, but it was still always up to me. There was kind of he was a gift sent to me. So this is where I'd like to explore another little piece of this, which I think of as the magic piece.
Yeah.
So the magic piece was that some years had gone by from this particular relationship. Not that many, but my mother died unexpectedly.
Right.
And I find it hard to talk about still without kind of getting emotional. So
I get it. That's fine. We'll just accept it.
Yeah. So, so she died unexpectedly, and my whole life got turned upside down. So that's when I was 28. Right. And some very interesting things happened, though, out of that. Sort of a few months down the track, quite a few months down the track, I didn't know what to do with myself. And so I just had a voice in my head. That's all I can explain. I had a voice in my head that said, when you don't know what to do, go and help someone else. And so that's what I did. So I went and offered to support on a workshop that I'd been on myself. And in the process of doing that, I met this man. And I remember seeing him sitting in this circle. And I thought, well, he's really cute. He had a nice suit on. I do like a man in a suit, I have to say.
You see, ladies?
Man in a suit. And that was Doug.
Right.
So
he's thoroughly lovely, by
he
the
is a
way.
very lovely man. He's a lovely man. And within a month we were living together. And within probably 2 months, he had convinced me to go and volunteer on a program called Discovery. Discovery was a 7-day residential program for teenagers on leadership skills and study skills, and I went as an adult volunteer. And in those days you paid, so I paid my $500 and I went along, and I went into this environment that I had never seen the like of before. And there was this man at the front of the room, and he had 120 teenagers enthralled. And I thought, I have no idea what that is, but that's what I want to do. So one of the magic pieces for me was that, and that probably propelled me forward, was that I had a vision, I had a goal, I had a desire, and I wanted to be, what I later discovered, I wanted to be a facilitator. Because I don't even know why, really, but what I know in that environment was that I certainly felt completely okay to be myself. There was a moment where we were doing lots of setup, and Michael gets on the microphone and he goes, "In a moment, but not quite yet, a leader will emerge. We don't know who that leader is, but when they emerge, we will know." And
you could have done that into there.
I could have done. I probably lost it all because I did that, right? The time warp starts playing and my hands both shot up. And next thing, I'm leading 50 people in the time warp. Something that I my 11-year-old and I hadn't done since. And I didn't get told off, or people didn't think I was a show off. They called me a leader. And I was just being me.
So that child appeared.
Boom. So Doug led me to that place, right? And then Trish got to show up.
Right.
Now, I spent most of Discovery in a pretty much continual panic attack. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. But I was just completely committed. I then went on to staff on around 17 Discovery programs, and I became a facilitator, which wasn't necessarily easy because there were some people who didn't think I should. And so then there was that other, so I had a really strong vision, but then I also had this strong kind of, that kick-ass Trish came back.
Yeah, good on
and
you.
said, fuck you.
Yeah, good on you, yeah.
I'm going to do this. Yeah. And so actually the origin of the workshops that we run come from that place. So about 5 years in, I guess, I said to Michael Wall, why aren't you running any facilitation skills workshops in New Zealand? Because he lives in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, no one's asked me. So I asked him.
Right.
So I went to Hawaii, sat in a little dark room while everyone else went to the beach, and we geeked out on what we thought should be in this workshop. And he said, I've always wanted to run a workshop called Authenticity.
Right.
So
there it's stringing back.
And, well, he would come to New Zealand and we started running the workshops together. And then at some point over the years, he stopped coming, and so we kept going, and now there's 3 other people as well as me who run the workshops.
That's how long?
Well, I tell you, I was pregnant with my daughter, the first one we ran, and she's nearly 19.
Right.
So it's been nearly 20 years. And what's really intriguing to me is the core of the work, the thinking that we did hasn't changed. We still have 4 really core outcomes that we want people to get from our workshops. And they are always the same. They are that essentially you can just be yourself. So that's okay. That we're going to help you build confidence And now I'm giving this list and my mind's just gone blank and can't remember the other two. But
we want you to forget.
Yes, we want you to forget what's important. But essentially, the essence is still there from, and they've evolved over the years, and they've kind of met the corporate world, and so we still take the same message because people are people, regardless of whether they seek personal development or whether they have to run meetings and they're scared because they're high risk meetings or something, they're really important, and then they come to us and we go, hey, you're okay, I'm okay, we're all okay. So that was actually Doug was the gift. I like to think my mother sent him.
Right.
I think my mother sent him. Yeah. And then and so
that reminds me of that book, what was it called? Where one person, you read one person out and the other person gets read in. What is the name of that book? It's just gone out of my mind. It was a wonderful movie as well.
Oh, not Sliding Doors?
No. The premise of the book is that when you read a character in the book and you were someone you had to have this special power, you would read, God, I'm still trying to remember the name of the book. You would read the book. It's almost like being a horse whisperer, but obviously it wasn't. A book whisperer, you were a reader of some kind. And your mother got read out. And Dad got read in.
Okay. So it doesn't matter what the name of the book is.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
But it's a great one to look at. But I sometimes feel that life is a little bit like that,
Yeah. I think she sent him.
Someone moves out of the way or moves in, and we suddenly go, oh, well, I swapped that life for this life.
Yeah, that was important. It was one of those magical things, that you just can't, whatever you call it, whether it's your spiritual journey or, I think I was meant to.
Yeah.
I think I was meant to have that experience, and I think I was meant to. So I felt like from that whole time, really up until now, that I've just been blessed. And then there was a point where I even went, I don't want to do all the work. I want to reach more people.
Yeah.
I want to reach more people with this message that they're okay. And I thought, maybe, does that mean I have to be a public speaker? Because I'm not a public speaker, I'm a facilitator. I have conversations with people. I don't talk at them. And so I kind of didn't want to do that. But so my darling business partner, Carolyn, she coined this term. She said, I've often been told if you don't know what to do, go general, And I went, well, the generalised principles for me are this. I want to do work I love. I want to do it with people that I love. And I want it to be easy. Because whenever I thought about getting bigger, it felt harder, and I didn't want harder because I had kids and a life, and I didn't want to work harder. And so all of a sudden, just from kind of holding that vision or the space for that, now there's 4 of us, plus a fabulous admin person. And
I'm just picking up on this thing of living life with meaning.
Yes.
And you can't live life with meaning unless you believe that everything that you're doing it actually matters.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that you've got this wonderful narrative going through that, even if we take that point from your mother and Doug being an angel and coming in, it seems that to me that some may talk about it applying meaning, but I don't think there's anything wrong with applying meaning. I think what happens is that when we believe that what we do matters, then meaning is given to us. And it seems to me that you're really living a life of meaning.
It's really important to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like part of that journey, I make good decisions when I'm I know when I make good decisions. I know because it feels like it's the right thing to do. It's very much about an integrity thing for me. It's my integrity, not anyone else's. But yeah, it has to be meaningful. And I feel like I get rewarded for that.
Yeah.
I really do.
It can be that instant reward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I have the thought and just hold the space for it, I don't write goals down or anything. I used to. But what I found is if I just kind of like almost going for a feeling. And yeah, I do mad things, like I have a little task list on my computer and I just write things down. And, 3 years ago I wrote...
Did you just say you do little man things?
No.
What did you say? I thought you said I do little man things.
No.
What did you say?
I don't know, but it wasn't that.
I do little man things.
I just write down goals,
Right.
but then I just kind of let them be.
Right.
And they come. I think... I mean, we're so fortunate. We have government contracts where we, run workshops on a sort of a annual basis for many of them, and we've done really well. Right. Lots of people who do what I do, are sort of individual practitioners, and I do think that because we kind of hold this space, and very good workshops, and we're very into our sort of work ethic, and we're really into looking after our customers and making it easy to work with us and that kind of thing, that I think we've been rewarded. So yeah, we're really lucky. We get to do some wonderful work. I feel really blessed.
And inside it's easy, it's flowing.
It flows. I mean, it doesn't mean, ever since now that I've got a team and I'm sort of in a leadership role as well, my job is to look after these people. That's my job. And as well as, create workshops and bring business in and run workshops and all of those things. So my workload's increased it's in a different way. But if I continue to kind of hold that space for the same thing, that these are people that I love and we're doing work that we love, and they get paid, which is really nice. There are 5 families that get supported by this work, and people love what we do. So yeah.
So just kind of like a little bit of a seam. It appears as if there's this lovely thread. There's the explosive you who gets squashed. You get this period of growing anxiety, but that anxiety leads you to the need to explode.
Correct.
And I love the fact that you've come to a place where you're exploding daily. It's quite funny. I mean, if anybody knows,
you can put it like that.
So there's fireworks outside tonight, everybody, and so I'm hoping that they don't come over the mic or whatever, and some of the noises, the extraneous noises that come from running a studio off your garage. But Trish, this is quite a wonderful place to be, because I think everybody, at least in my world, would love to feel that they could explode, but they feel that the place that they're at is a wall, not a pathway. And I love your story, because this anxiety, this agoraphobia, this feeling of not being able to move forward was the very reason you've been able to move forward.
And it's not there. It's not gone.
Right.
It's just managed now, and part of who I am and part of my story. And when people see me, I'm now very competent at the front of the room, with that story, I think it opens up possibilities for other people. And I don't mind that. There's a certain vulnerability to it, and it's an edited version of it, but in terms of it's still the truth, but I don't want to spend, 2 days talking about myself on a workshop, but I feel like it's been, and this is where the spiritual journey comes in, this has been my path. And it doesn't mean I think necessarily that there's one path or that, but I think that when we look at it like that and see things as opportunities and hold certain beliefs. I mean, you talked about responsibility before, and one of the things that I remember learning in one of the workshops I did was the concept of taking personal responsibility, and that it didn't mean it was my fault, but the way they talked about it was actually your ability to respond, or your respond ability. And I mean, I still think about that and what it means and how it shows up. And it can come in little micro things, you know. It's like, but fundamentally when I've owned or chosen my response as best I can, because I also appreciate that you can't always choose a response, because, you know, if you're in fight or flight or fear, that's actually not a chosen response. It's a reaction. But then there's another place that you can go to from there. So it doesn't have to be in that moment, but it can then be, okay, now what can I do about that?
Well, that's right. I mean, Wilhelmina, my wife, as you know, she used to have this phrase. She says, "It's not what you've done; it's what you do next that matters most." Yeah. And I think that sums it up very, very nicely. You know, in the sense that, you know, you can have those moments of, "Oh my God, I've made a complete cock up," but it's okay because you've got another second, you've got another minute,
and maybe an hour or a day, or a week, or a month, or a year. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things I used to talk about that was below the line were things like blaming other people or other things or anything, or even yourself. Things like justifying why that happened, because there's a very good reason why that happened. It's nothing to do with me. Or denying that it happened in the first place. But the stuff that stuff's kind of leaves you powerless.
That's right.
And I think, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I think that, you know, you have full power over your destiny, because shit happens, you know. I mean, not only did I lose my father before my mother, but I lost my beloved brother 18 months after my mother. So I had a very short period of time where I had a huge amount of grief, and a lot of things that I responded to in that particular time, I wouldn't have said I chose necessarily, but I was in such a traumatic state that was the best choice I had at the time. So there has to be a lot of forgiveness in that as well. You can't point the finger at yourself and go, I could do better, I could do different. You can do that, but I'm not sure that always has served me. I have to be gentle and kind with myself too, you know. I have to allow myself to not have it handled. Yeah. Which I'm really good at, not having it all handled. Yeah. Like, and that responsibility thing is a daily practice.
Yeah, it's one you remind yourself of, right? I mean, it's, you know,
constantly.
In actual fact, just yesterday, I was in conversation with somebody about the idea of blame and responsibility, and she was speaking to me about the fact that she felt like she'd lost control.
Yeah.
And maybe this falls into it, hopefully, perfectly. That is that when you blame something or even a circumstance that it may well be true. Yeah. It may well be true that it is a circumstance fault, such as the death of a loved one. Yeah. It isn't your fault. Yeah. But if you blame the circumstance, it leaves you without any other road to take.
Yeah. That's and it's a hard one to grasp, because it feels like, because this happened, I can't. Yeah. And
you become the victim instead of the victor.
Well, and that's it. And that's the victim. And so the only place where you have personal power is where you take responsibility. But it's very hard concept for people to grasp. I've been working with this for 20 mumble years. And I'm still working out the nuances of it, and where it feels like end up when I take personal responsibility, where it feels like I'm blaming myself. And I've got, you know, people have got good excuses and reasons for why they do or don't do things. And I think that being able to take responsibility is also a personal duty as well, because as soon as you try and make someone take personal responsibility, it's blame.
Right.
Boom.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's a really nuanced thing, and I I just like to sit with it sometimes, and sometimes it's clear as, and other times I taught a client of mine this once years ago when I sort of felt I should teach people these things. It's fairly arrogant of me, I think, in a way, but she really got it, and she said, do you know what she said? I've always thought of myself as a late person. So I was always late to meetings because I'm a late person. And she said, and it was always Auckland traffic fault because I was late. But she said, this has made me realise that I don't have to be a late person because actually I already know I'm fooling myself. I'm blaming Auckland traffic. But actually I know that if I leave 10 minutes early, I'll get to the meeting on time. But because I've decided that I'm a late person, I let that be a justification or a story that allows me to do that. And she said, because the reason it became important to her was because she was told by someone senior to her that if she kept doing that, she was jeopardising her career.
Right.
And all of a sudden she had a reason bigger than her story. Yeah. And sometimes that takes us time to get to that place, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's quite funny. A thing that I've said before many, many times on teaching videos, and that is that, you have somebody who's not a student who comes to me and says, you'll never get me to sing because I can't sing. Now, if
I'm not a singer.
Right.
Label.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But you would never say that about learning to drive. I'm not going to learn to drive because I can't drive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
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 And so when we take on board a persona of, whether it be I can't do or I am not.
Or I am a.
Yeah. The being of.
Yeah.
We seem to feel that being is the one, has the strings, has the reins.
It's a very powerful thing. She changed. I mean, she got it, and it might seem like a very simple thing, but I don't know whether it was because she had a catalyst or something that was bigger than her need to believe that she didn't have to make the effort to be on time. Interesting concept.
So here you are, Trish.
I am. On the purple couch.
Chair.
Sorry.
The purple chair.
It's a
down.
couch.
The purple chair. And look, I've really enjoyed this because I think you've touched on things that no matter who we speak to, there's going to be that theme of what are you going to take on board and how you look at the wounds. Could you blame the anxiety? Could you blame it? Or could you own it? And I think,
I mean, occasionally I'm tempted. Fuck anxiety.
Yeah, I was going to say,
fucking asshole,
And then also, earlier on you said, fuck it, let's go with it. And I was really grateful that you said that because I think many times in our lives we don't take this, we have these feelings of, fuck it, I'm going to do this. And then we don't. We just, but you have this thing where you just go, it's time to explode.
Yeah, that is definitely the nature side of things. So that magic formula of all of those things coming together, it's not the only formula, There
well, I'm sure
there are many ways of approaching things.
Yeah.
You don't want a whole bunch of Trishas running around the world, and only Trishas. That would be horrendous.
You don't want anybody exploding and going fuck it.
No, not continuously. Not everyone, anyway.
No.
But I think
you wouldn't have an accountant.
That's true.
Right?
That is true.
Right?
Yeah.
An accountant.
You need measured, analytical, amiable
matter of
people.
fact, if we didn't have many fuck it people, we wouldn't have business owners.
Yeah. There are definitely a lot of my friends are fuck it people. When we go on holiday, it's ridiculous because everyone's used to being in charge.
Right, yeah.
So we all then we forget we have to consider other people. Luckily, we now just go with people that like doing what we do. And we usually have a plan and then no one argues. It's funny though. I'm attracted to people like that. Yeah. I am attracted to people like that. Yeah. I like people that make decisions quickly. I like people that know their own minds, even if it's not the same as mine. I can respect that. But interestingly, my business partner is the sort of, in some ways, the polar opposite. She's very amiable and she knows that she needs to basically clear the path so I can go like that.
Right.
Yeah, that's what she's like. And she's, God, I wouldn't be without her.
Right.
Yeah. wouldn't be without her. So
Wow.
I'm very blessed.
Indeed,
I'm very
indeed,
lucky.
I see that.
Yeah,
but I also see
really.
my own blessings because of this conversation. I also see that, oh, gosh, I've got to count my blessings a lot more.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the practice that I have now, is that, and it's become cliched and it's slightly disappointing that it is, but it usually means that it's also out there in the world. And that is the concept of gratitude and recognition of, and at the moment in my life, I have got stuff going on all around me, but not me. I have people who marriages are splitting up. I have people who have got potentially life-threatening illnesses. There is just stuff going on all around me. And I don't know whether it's an age or a thing, but, there's just one after the other.
One of the things that we've done, and I know we need to bring this to a close, but one of the things that we tend to do is that we're always looking for the forever pill. Look more beautiful, get my abs right, We're always looking for the forever pill, the spring, of eternal life or immortality or whatever it is. Even in, Facebook has brought that to some. YouTube has brought that to some. If they use, their image at least is already there. Oh my God, I'm saying this by myself. But
Carry on.
The thing that I that's given me more hope than anything else, just talking about what's surrounding you, is that life is the tragedy. Everyone is going to have the ending of death.
This is true.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, we can look at that as being, this sad Shakespearean play, or maybe even an opera. It's Tosca and somebody knifes themselves or jumps off the building. It's this sad opera. But, life is the tragedy of death at the very end.
Yep.
But interestingly enough, it's actually quite comedic. There's a lot of laughs along the way.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
And, I don't want to laugh at your life at all. But
You can.
But if we look at it, isn't it funny? Isn't it funny that the explosion put a lid on for a little while, re-exploded? You could go, knew that was going to happen.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely...
There's a comedy in this.
Absolutely. My leg's getting dead.
Is it getting... Okay, you can move.
Might have been here a while.
Yeah, well, we have,
That's better. Yeah, I think it is. And I think that the ability to detach from making it such a tragedy and just look at it and go, because we're all ridiculous, really.
We are.
We're all completely ridiculous. And the secret to happiness is right there, and we just don't know how to do it. But it's acceptance, by the way. Just peace of mind. Accept everything. Peace of mind. You're done. Just FYI. We could have just done
Can we skip all the other lessons,
10
please?
seconds. Yeah. And it's like, that's my whole lesson. And that underneath all of those things was just the acceptance of Trish and finding that who she is okay. And it's still something that I'm working on. I can't tell you that I'm there.
Well, it's quite funny. I was, just listening to you. You remind me of something I said 7 or 8 years ago. I was in a religion where I needed to be certain of absolutely everything.
Okay.
And I won't name the religion or whatever because the people in it are lovely. But, it was all about knowing the certainty. And I gave that up. But I made this up about 7 or 8 years ago, because I needed to find a way in which I could explain my certainty, or my uncertainty, should I say, away without feeling guilty about not having certainty. And I know that sounds weird, but from that kind of perspective, from being certain to be able to say, no, I can accept uncertainty. I can accept the uncertainty of death. I can accept the
As in when it's coming. And
when it's coming, how it's coming, why it came to me, And so I just made up this little thing. It says, I'm not certain of anything, and that which I am certain of, I'm probably wrong about. And that kind of removed any of the anxiety I felt about needing to be a thing, have all the answers. Removing that need to be the answer even to my own life's questions. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be uncertain.
Interesting.
And that way I can't be held accountable. No, I'm only kidding.
I think that's the truth. Yeah.
But I can be responsible.
Yeah.
Trish, this has been a very exciting first conversation.
Possibly last.
No, there's more. They're all booked in.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Don't be sorry. This is
this
wonderful.
Has been fun.
No,
it's been
fun.
really, really
and I think
interesting.
Those that will listen to it will find a little something in it for them. They'll be able to see a little bit of Trish in them, or should I say a little bit of themselves. Finally, something's opened up. That's my wish anyway.
Well, it's been interesting deciding to talk about it, or being willing to talk about it. And it's been even more interesting to talk about it. The chances are very good that I'll have some performance anxiety about what I said, and why would anyone find anything I said inspiring or useful. And yet also I know that there are many examples out in the real world where that is contradicted as well. You know, I know that people benefit from coming to our workshops, and so
why not you, Trish?
I just decided to do this and do my best to let it be, and that's all there is to it, really.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Find out next week. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming in, Trish. Thank you for making my evening. It would have been dross.
Mine would have been, yes, less interesting.
Yeah.
It's been interesting preparing for this and watching my own process and thinking about when I walk the dog is when I do my best thinking, you know, what would I say? What should I say? What could I say? What don't I want to say? What do I want to say? Thinking about the vulnerability of it, thinking about because that need for sort of privacy, that need for the walls. Yeah.
Well, Trish, continue to explode.
Do my best.
I think that's what we want. Round of applause. Thank you for coming.
Triangle.
Yeah, that wraps it up.
We're done.
I think we're done.
Good.
Bye.
Thanks.